Hey guys, welcome back to the Book and Beverage Review. It's Jane, where today we will be reviewing a very interesting book. It's like a RPG literature sort of fantasy situation. It is The Dying Breed Hunters, book 1 of the God King Emmanuel saga. And it was written by TJ Lombardi, which I have a very interesting story about how I met him. And we will actually be reviewing this Tim Horton's Starry-Eyed TimsBoost, which has Red Bull in it. So let's sip a beverage and get into our story. Alright, so first impressions is it's purple, it's kind of cool. I don't know what is going on here or what the flavor is supposed to be. I'm kind of just going into this one blind. That is way too sweet. But it has that sour bite that Red Bull has. It tastes like Red Bull and grape soda, if I'm really being honest. Which is not bad, it's kind of delicious, and I may come to crave this, but it tastes very sweet, very sour. It's almost like you melted down a grape Jolly Rancher and put it into a soda, if that makes any sense. Okay, so let's get into our book. I got this on Kindle. So I was at Phoenix Fan Fusion and I saw the author. What really got me was that I saw his map and I felt like it was one of the more detailed maps I'd ever seen. I was super interested in it, and I actually asked him if he wanted to take a picture with it so I can use it for social media purposes, and he said yes. He was actually really nice about it. So as we were talking, as a reviewer, sometimes I'm given free books. I didn't ask for a free book because I didn't know if I was going to review this, so I just went on Amazon and I bought it right then and there just so I could, have this on my radar. It wasn't even necessarily something that I knew if I was going to review or not, but I did think he was cool, so I did review it. One thing that got me is that these cards came with it. I thought this was really interesting. It had the artwork on there, and it also had some reviews and some tidbits on the back. So some authors were doing this at Phoenix Fan Fusion, and I love this idea. This actually got me super interested in the books, and I felt like it was just a little bit more engaging. He has these little trading card situations for book 1 and book 2, because book 2 is coming out. I thought that the beginning of this novel had a super interesting concept, but I thought the writing was, I just didn't feel immersed into the story yet, which can happen. After about 30 or 40 pages, I felt like the novel took a turn for the better, because I started recognizing that this author could write very well. In fact, I was pretty amazed because by the time I had finished the book, I felt like it was almost two different authors from the beginning to the end. And one thing I noticed is that he has an amazing talent for explaining battle scenes, explaining the emotions and the mentality behind what the characters are saying, and I also just love the way he described things. So I don't usually put quotes in my videos, but I wanted to put quotes here because it wouldn't make sense if I didn't explain what I was talking about. Kodgirak lifted his arm and summoned a flame. Black, red, and white swirling magic flowed around his arm and poured into the flame, which grew from a small flicker to a burning torch. The light illuminated the figure so that they could see the embellishments on their armor in fine detail. It was obsidian plated with emerald green engraved designs. The green glowed in the light, and the shine of the obsidian complemented the dark world of the forest in which their bodies were forever entombed. I feel like that was one of those scenes which I loved. This person has a lot of talent. I loved that imagery. This was a great scene, and it really took me into the novel, and I really felt it at that point. I think that he had spent a lot of time living and thinking about this world. I know that I'd watched him on a live stream and he had said he was going to a D&D game, so I know he does play D&D, which makes a lot of sense because this is a very D&D sort of militaristic world, which are both of the worlds that I guess he was a part of and that maybe he loved mixed together. And this novel is a great showcasing of that. It was very well written. The vocabulary he used was exceptional, especially for the things he was talking about. I felt as though There was something really special about these characters. I felt as though they could impart a lot of wisdom. Kind of like if you remember in Harry Potter, Dumbledore was very insightful, and Cod Girak was really similar in that sense, in the way that he was advising our main character, Liam. I think that those things in particular made me feel as though this novel could be something a lot more, something young kids can hold on to and maybe cherish for the rest of their lives. There was a lot of militaristic scenes and militaristic training which went excellent. In fact, it was the best example I had ever seen of something like that, like a training sequence. If you want to think of something like Brahm and Aragon in the Aragon inheritance cycle, I've seen a lot of this sort of coming of age magic type of story, young boy, but I think that this training sequence was probably my favorite. I think it was the best of in that sense. And a lot of that probably owes to his own militaristic experience. But that being said, it brings something very original to the table. Another quote I really liked was, "The screams that were normally of joy and happiness of the children playing were now ringing in his mind as screams of terror. A game of hide and seek was now imagined as hide and survive. He could hear the yakking of the gnolls, the high-pitched yelping and barking that stirred your mind towards madness. His peace was invaded by the thought of bloodshed. His breathing still heavy, he pressed his lips together. The more he tried to prevent the darkness from taking over his dream, the more it seemed impossible to stop it." I thought that was an incredible paragraph. I'm just going to be honest, I think that this author has been through some heavy stuff. And I think it shows in his writing, but in the best of ways. That's some traumatizing stuff. I thought that some of this novel was a little immature at certain points. Certainly a lot of jokes about private parts, you know what I'm saying? So I'm trying to keep the chat on PG, even though I cuss like a sailor in my personal life. But the thing is, I didn't mind that as much as I felt like sometimes it was hampering the character development of the main character. So, and the end of the novel, I felt like it was a little anticlimactic, but it was still a good ending. The cover I enjoyed. I thought it was beautiful, but when the pictures were actually in black and white, I enjoyed them more. Here's a few of the images that I saw that I felt very invested in these characters after seeing their images. I thought the images were beautiful. I don't know who the artist was or the illustrator, but I want to know his name. I want to know who's making these images because they were dope as all get out. When I had purchased the novel, not like a few hours later, I had actually gone and flipped through it. And I remember by the third or fourth page, I remember telling myself, this is going to be a best-selling author. Is going to be, not that it could, that he is going to be best-selling. This novel was funny. I was laughing out loud at some parts. And yeah, sometimes there were the more childish private part jokes, but I mean, I did enjoy it. And I do get a sense of camaraderie. I actually liked the villains a lot. I felt like the villains had a lot of character. There is this aspect, though, that the God King Emmanuel is also kind of like a undead zombie or something. And I didn't know if that was kind of calling to Jesus, because they call Jesus Emmanuel and they call him a zombie sometimes too. I didn't know if it was referencing that or not. But I'm not gonna get into that. I'm not gonna get into that. I'm gonna look at the novel for what it is. So let's get into our final thoughts. As for a rating, if we're grading it as a D&D fiction, it gets 5 stars all day long. This was well done. I thought it was a great vision, incredible world building. I feel like the history and the legends that are there, the characters, the fighting scenes were epic. I do think that it had some shortcomings. One of them being, I feel like the plot could have been a little heavier. And I do feel like our main character, Liam, I didn't feel as much of a attachment to him as you normally feel in a main character of an epic fantasy. I was going to give this novel 4 stars as an average between the 3 from the epic fantasy and the 5 from the D&D bracket, but something that happened is that I sat back and I thought to myself, was there something special in here? And I said there were 2 things very special. One, I feel like this author has talent. I feel like this author has wild talent. And one of the things I really liked was at the end, I didn't know this, but there is a scene where the main character comes across a bunch of crosses, and it's to represent the fallen defenders and warriors who had died in battle. And the names were listed in the novel, and I thought that was cool. It was defender, this person from the house of this. But at the end of the novel, he had given his story and showed the people he was actually referencing, like the actual names of other servicemen, even someone who had actually been an airman who had been the RAF. He had mentioned them in the novel. These were real people who had fallen in combat or had done acts of great honor or valor, and he paid tribute to them in his fantasy novel. I really enjoyed that. I thought that was really special. Instead of it just being a great D&D-esque RPG literature, it could become a gold standard for RPG literature. That being said, it could also go from like a good or fair fantasy novel to a best-selling mainstream novel. I hope that it does. I think that it's something that I would really like to see. I think this story deserves to be looked at. If you like that sort of thing, like this sort of epic fantasy D&D-esque sort of literature, this is a great novel. And you should pick it up. You should read it because this author is going to continue to write and he's going to be a big deal one day. Get a signed copy while you can. It's worth 5 stars all day long. So I did have a hard time figuring out what the rating was because I couldn't understand if I wanted to put it 4 or 5, but I did choose on 5 in the end, and for good reason. I'm gonna give this 4 stars. I feel like there's a bunch of sugar in here and it's being masked. It's a lot of sugar. I'm gonna give this a 4. And that's it. So I'm gonna put the link down below. Go buy this book. Go buy this book. It's a great book, and I do think that coming with time, we're going to hear good things about this author. This one's going to be on the scene for a long time, and I look forward to seeing what happens in the future. So, thank you guys for watching. I look forward to sipping a beverage with you and getting into a new story soon. Take care.